Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to do some painting with some very humble supplies. I'm using the set of 3 inexpensive water brushes by Royal & Langnickel and some of the Royal & Langnickel pan watercolors. I'm going to start with my largest water brush, and I am just going to wet the top of the sky a little bit. I'm using a 5x7 piece of watercolor paper, and this is a handmade watercolor paper, so it has some really pretty texture to it. I'm going to wet it kind of like in a diagonal from the top of the paper, kind of angled down, and I'm going to start by picking up some of this, I would call it like a cerulean blue color, and I'm going to tap that off in my palette a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of drag it out, maybe leave a little bit of white to be clouds, and just kind of wisp it across the sky and down a little bit. I'm going to let the paint just kind of do its thing. Now I'm going to pick up, and I apologize for the noise, but I don't want to stop once I've started painting because I don't want to let things dry out. I'm going to pick up some of this kind of Prussian blue color, and I am going to put in some mountains kind of coming off from the edge. And it's fine if this gets a little fuzzy because it's going to push it back more into the distance, and that's what I want. I want this to have I'm going to start that mountain up a little bit higher. I want that to push back into the distance a little bit. Now I'm going to grab some of this kind of mauve, it's actually kind of like a quinacridone red, and I'm going to add that to some of the Prussian blue and bring down some more mountains so I get those kind of purple purple mountain majesty going. And as you can see, I'm getting into the drier part of my paper, and what I'm going to do is do a little negative painting because we're going to have some trees coming down like this. So I am just going to be kind of stabbing my brush up and down. I'm still staying with that larger water brush. You can go smaller if you want, but I would hold off on going smaller with the size as long as you can. A little bit more of that mauve on its own. I sprayed my palette. I took the pans out of the tray here and plopped them into my ceramic palette. Then I sprayed everything. So I'd have some water on the surface too, because I know that often with this handmade paper, it's so rough. Even though it's called cold press, it's still pretty rough. So I like to have my brush nice and wet, and having that water already on the paper really helps with that. Now I want to start to get a little bit more warmer colors into my mountains, so I'm going to grab some of this burnt sienna color, add that in a little bit, and add a little bit of green. So I'm getting kind of like a warmer gray brown color. And I'm going to start bringing that down as well. I have kind of a puddle here where I got a little too much water, so I'm just going to blot that up. And then I am going to start adding some areas where I want there to be some rocks. That's rocky mountainside here. Maybe add a little bit more blue to that, of the lighter blue color. Now I've got a loose hair on my brush. I was able to pull that right out, so that's good. If you do have like a hair that kind of goes crazy, you can try pulling it out or snipping it if it doesn't want to pull out for you. Now I'm going to have a little bit of a water area down here, so I just want to kind of sketch out where I'm going to have some rocks and some water. I'm going to put a little bit more water onto my palette because my brush wanted to dry brush there. I don't really want a dry brush effect, but I do want kind of like a light gray effect, and by keeping it light I can put trees overlapping any of this if I want to, which will be really helpful. That way I'm not locking down, because when you're doing landscapes like this, if you're painting out on location, you wouldn't like have tape or masking fluid probably, or any of those things. You'd want to be catching all of this while the light is consistent, so you don't have time to be fussy like you would in the studio. So that's what I want to kind of paint that in the same manner that you would be painting out on location. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to see if I can drag up a few tree trunks coming from this lower area, so that when I go to paint them I'll have a little bit of structure. Now I want to I like to make some greens because the green right from the pan can be a little bit harsh, so I'm going to take some yellow. This is just like a lemon yellow that came in the set. I'm going to grab some of the Prussian blue. And it gives me a little bit more of a natural green. I'm going to start with that. I'm just going to be kind of like dabbing it in up here. Just kind of scribbling it up and down. And I'm also going to throw some taller trees over there with a little bit lighter color. And in fact, I'll grab a little bit of that orange too. That's going to tone down the green a little bit, give it more of that sappier color. And now I can try some of that kind of less natural looking green. Probably switch to another brush here in a second. When you're using a variety of colors, try to mix them down and not necessarily use them right straight from the pan, because if you can mix them with other colors you've already used, it will give you a little bit more of a natural look. I want to, this is really vibrant, so I want to dull that down a little bit, so using some orange in there will help. I can bring that color right down to the edge of those rocks that I sketched in. Going to grab some Prussian blue with that premix green and throw some of that in towards the back, because I want those to be cooler and push back. Towards the back of the landscape a little bit more. And I'm going to grab some yellow. Don't worry, you're just contaminating the top of that pan, so don't worry, it's not going to mess anything up. And I'm going to throw those right back there. Maybe a little bit of brown, burnt sienna color with some yellow will help. It'll look a little bit drier and kind of natural. And I'll want some more of that color in a little bit. So what I'm going to do to clean my brush is just kind of squeeze it out on a paper towel, get that excess pigment off of there. And I'm going to go in with a smaller brush. I'm going to take the smaller one on the set and give it a try. Now if you, oh, you know what you could do? You could just plop those right out of the pans. That's a little bit easier. You could put them back in afterwards so they don't hop around too much in your palette. I'm going to take some of that green. I'm going to grab a little bit of that brown right there. Oh, that's nice. And I am going to go in and put some of these bigger trees. Now, everything is still wet. Your paper might dry a little quicker. I'm working in my basement. It's actually kind of a rainy winter day. And so it's kind of damp here, even though I have a space heater nearby, it's still really damp. So your paper might dry a little quicker than mine is. And if it is, using a water brush is going to help because it's going to constantly be feeding water out. So you'll find that if you had trouble with traditional brushes drying on you, you may not have so much of a hard time with the water brush. So that's another reason you might want to try a water brush. It is really handy for painting on the go. I generally prefer brush and water. And what you can do if you prefer to use a regular brush, and this is what you have from like a painting kit, you could just empty it out and dip it in a bucket of water and have a rag handy if you prefer to paint like that. It just gives you a little bit more versatility from one tool. So you have a tool you can use either way, which is nice. I do find this brush, it's really easy to squeeze, so if you have any issues like arthritis and you found other water brushes in the past like difficult to get the water out, you will have an easier time with the Royal Nickel ones. The body is softer to squeeze. I do recommend not losing the caps, because if you do want to put it away in your bag and cap it up, because it's easier to squeeze, it's going to tend to leak a little bit easier, so keep that in mind. I'm going to take some of that mauvey red color that I used. I'm going to make a really dark color. So I'm going to do that with the red and the purpley. So that purpley red and the green, look at it, makes it like a really inky black, and that I'm going to put right here in the center of these trees. Really get that contrast. And when you want less water, I'm going to take that right out of its pan too, because it's just a little easier to deal with that way. You can throw that in anywhere you need that contrast. And using a smaller brush, that's what I was going to say, using a smaller brush, water brush, it's going to feed less water, so you'll be able to keep your colors a little bit darker that way too. And make myself a nice little ridge. I've got all that nice pigment and water there. All right. Now I want to put some other vegetation in. I'm going to stick with that brush. I'm just squeezing it and wiping it on my paper towel. I'm going to grab some yellow. Mix it down in that red a little bit. Maybe take some of that blue we used in the sky, because I like to kind of repurpose the colors whenever possible. And I'm going to throw in just some other little bits of foliage here. Get a more earthy color here with a little more yellow and some of that brown. It's a real fun project for beginners. And I want to get some water in there, and I'm going to use that sky color. I kind of want to plop that out. It doesn't want to come out because I've added too much water so far, so it's made the paint swell. So I'm going to put in some of the water here in the little stream. What a pretty color. I'm going to put that in kind of on its own. So this is kind of where I break the rules of mixing the colors. Sometimes you want that color a little brighter, so I'm doing that on its own. Then I'm going to grab some of the burnt sienna on its own. And I'm going to throw some of that in here and there, because this is where you're kind of seeing the bottom of the stream, because it's a very kind of rocky stream bed here. And they will mix, and you will lose some of that vibrancy as well. So that's another reason why I want to do it that way. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the green, because those colors will be reflected in the water. And then I'll kind of like, go in and around some of these rocks just to kind of get an interesting pattern going of the water. Can even get a little bit of that purpley color from the mountains, just kind of integrated a little bit. So this nice cool stream happening there. Now, some of the rocks, if you keep it, whoops, I just rinsed that off of my water. You can do that too. If you feel like you're constantly squeezing your brush out and you're at home, you have a thing of water, that will clean your brush off a lot easier. I feel like I want kind of like a little bit of a yellow ochre wash on these rocks, but I don't have that color in the set, so I'm going to take some burnt sienna, a little bit of yellow. Just want to kind of like really soft. I'm going to take some of that other... I don't really, actually, you know what, I don't want to add that other brown because I haven't used it yet. Let's just take the burnt sienna and the yellow. And add some of that here and there. This is fun, isn't it? Okay, now I want to get a little contrast in the rocks. I'm still like, this is pretty much how you'd paint on location. I haven't I haven't like let anything dry. I haven't used a heat tool. I'm going to make kind of like an orangey color with the burnt sienna and the yellow. I want to put maybe little bits of like brown or scruffy vegetation here and there. And maybe some greener. Kind of like some more springy green stuff around the water's edge. We'll do some little grasses around the water's edge with that lighter, springier green color. And then we'll add a little bit of contrast. We'll take that dark color, which we made with the mauvey red and the green. We'll put that right along the rocks. Make some shadows. Define some of these areas, some of these rocks a little bit. Just kind of chisel out little bits of ground here. And then maybe for a last touch, we'll just put a few little ripples in the water. I think I'll do, maybe do a purple. I'll do the Prussian blue and that mauvey red. I'm mixing it right over where I had that dark color. And I think I'll just do a little bit of ripple-y action in the water. It's nice and cool. It's a nice cool shadow because it's purpley. I think that'll just work out really well. There, and that's how you paint a easy mountainy stream landscape. It was a lot of fun. It's a great way to warm up, and try these techniques next time you're painting out on location because they're very easy to layer up and get a really nice effect. So I hope you enjoyed this. Please give me a thumbs up if you did, and until next time, happy crafting.